Greetings and salutations. I hope you are all reading good books or good short stories. And I have just finished a very good short story that is in the Pan Books Science Fiction, The Eighth Galaxy Reader, edited by Frederik Pohl. This is a beautiful little book. I have no memory of when or where I got it. I suspect I might have got it while I was in England and just failed to add it to my database, which just proves that I need to database better. Now, in this book is Critical Mass by Frederik Pohl and C. M. Kornbluth. It is the last story in the book. It's a good story. So, Kornbluth is well known to have died young, and Frederik Pohl is well known to have gone through his stories, incomplete stories and books, and finished many of them off. Critical Mass is one of those. So it was first published, I do believe, in Galaxy Science Fiction. This book doesn't credit that. And I do believe it came out about 4 years after Kornbluth's death. So that would that have been 1962, I think. Okay, so essentially written in 1962 and earlier by Frederik Pohl and Kornbluth. I read it as part of my attempt to work my way through authors whose surname begins with K, so I read it more for the Kornbluth side of the matter. Now, Critical Mass, there are notes online that say that Pohl assembled that from notes Kornbluth had for 3 story ideas, plus a story that Pohl himself had from 1954. And the story takes place in 1998. It's set in America, an America that never was and never has been. And it hypothesizes an America in which Cold War has continued for about 50 years. Everyone's in this permanent state of readiness for nuclear attack. And there are certain laws in place about military exercises for attacking aircraft and missiles, and drills for going into bomb shelters are almost daily occurrence, and they're very heavily legislated. If you don't, I did wonder earlier in the book what would happen if you just refused to go into a shelter. Well, it turns out that if you refuse to go into a shelter, or if you refuse to take all the accoutrements you're meant to have with you at all times into that shelter, you can be arrested and charged and go through the whole police procedure. So that was interesting. It's making it sound a bit like a totalitarian regime. In this story, we follow essentially 3 people. One is just a new graduate, an unlikable character, but it's really interesting. You've also got a magazine editor, and the title is revealed as Critical Mass, of where that is fissionable material. The story sort of amalgamates together society as a critical mass event with the recent graduate, I think, described as a neutron, and the editor described as a nucleus, and then you have the president is described as a nuclear moderator. So the characters and their intersection with each other is what creates that fusionable chain reaction in society. I actually really like the way the notion of fusionable society and actual fusion were amalgamated in this one. And I liked the tone of it considerably. Now, for those of you who follow my videos regularly, that might surprise you. This is humor. And humor and science fiction and I don't always go together. But this is also a very, very harsh satire. And I think the pure acidity of the satiric elements mean that the off-the-cuff humor and the irony and the essentially humorous viewpoint on humanity and their stupidity all come together, and it was kind of charming and I enjoyed it thoroughly. So in this future past America, we've got a society which essentially are only interested in politics, though politics also seems to be a bad word, and in a sports game. What is it? I think think it was baseball. America's big on baseball, isn't it? Yes, baseball. And it encounters a number of characters throughout the story as the story progresses, each of which is basically just asks about baseball, because there's an all-star, I think it is, game coming up, and that is the only thing on anyone's mind, including the president. That is the only burning issue that anyone ever discusses. You've got a lot of discussion of politics. And I think that if you knew the era in which this was written, you would probably understand more of the satire than I did. But it was well enough written that you don't have to know that in order to enjoy this. So there's Republicans, and there's, which are apparently also called middle roaders. The opposition are nationals. And then there's communists as well. There's a Democratic Party, but it's completely despised, being referred to as Party of Treason, which made me giggle every single time. Now, our recent graduate has graduated with a couple of degrees in concrete. He's been sponsored by a concrete company, and concrete is on everyone's mind because the only political matter that anyone is interested in, and they talk about it incessantly, is Civilian Shelters Bill, or CSB. I had to keep checking what CSB stood for. So though air raid shelters happen all the time, they happen during graduation, they happen during work, and everyone goes down, and it's this repetitive part of their society. And I do like the way those drills are portrayed very much. Even so, certainly our graduate, what's his name? I think it's Chase, is it? Yes, Walter Chase. Civil engineering. Very unlikable character. He's on the make. He's got no real emotions. He sees people as gateways to his future opportunities. But through him, we realize that the shelter drills that everyone does all the time are completely irrelevant. They wouldn't even have stood up against warheads from 50 years ago. Not a single one of them will survive an actual nuclear attack, which is, I believe, what they're all guarding against. So these civilian shelters have been proposed by political parties for years, and everyone's talking about them, but no one seems to be building them, and I'm not sure that anyone's funding them. They're constantly discussed in the way that many political parties in today's era, and in any political era, I suspect, keep discussing things without ever actioning them, and often without knowing them. Now, there's knowing anything about them, that is. Now, there's a few fascinating science fiction concepts in here. And one is that the president, whose name is, I don't remember, and who really is only a figurehead, both in the story and in the story and within the story, if you will, in society. So he's basically got a gibbon in his ear. I imagine it like an earbud, only maybe a very small earbud. Apparently there's a coil attached to it. And that is attached to what sounds like an AI-type computer, which tells him what to say. So when a person comes to visit him, that his ear will tell him, okay, address him as David, not Dave. He has no wife. He's got a history of mental illness, all this stuff. And so basically the president and his opinions are being run by this AI. Now, at one point, someone who is called David does visit him. And this person is on the board that is talking about the Civilian Shelters Bill. And he is distressed and alarmed that nothing has been done about it. They've been talking about it for ages, but nothing has been done. That's when the president realizes he doesn't actually know anything about the Civilian Shelters Bill, except that he talks about it all the time. So I think he tries asking his little AI and doesn't really get much. He tries asking the guy who ran his campaign, and he gets campaign speech. And so the story very unsubtly, but quite humorously and very satirically, exposes the complete lack of knowledge that many political speakers will have about their main topics. We also have robot or AI-driven cabs. I think it's robot cabs. and other things. The cabs, the elevators, everything has been programmed to say the right things, which are almost always about baseball or the civilian shelters bill. So you've got this, I guess it's almost a totalitarian-like society, which Pohl and Kornbluth were doing a lot of different things in. It's not a particularly short story. It's quite a few pages long. And it's great. This is one of the better short stories I've read this year. The combination of humour, serious social addresses, and predestination to some extent make this a great story, which I do thoroughly recommend, if you can find it anywhere. And I've already mentioned that Critical Mass came out in its own book as well, that was all stories by Pohl and Kornbluth. I would buy that one if I could find it, and if you can, you should. And you should read Critical Mass. Great short story. Thank you for watching. Read good short stories and good books.